There's just a few more people. Okay, I think we're running about 5 minutes late, so we will get started. Can everyone hear at the back? Yeah? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our panel on local news. My name is Sian. I'm a strategic partner manager at Facebook for news, and we're here today to talk to you for about an hour in total around local news and why that's so important to us. So I'm joined by Joy Jenkins, who is a research fellow at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism in Oxford, and by Karen Fleeting, who is the head of audience engagement for Reach in the UK. This monitor is on, which means I can see myself. It's actually quite distracting to see yourself out the corner of your eye, but we'll persevere. So just to give you a note on how this is going to run, I am going to give you a brief 5-10 minute overview of how we're thinking about local news at Facebook and why it's important to us. Joy is then going to talk to you about some of her research and some of the things that she's found that are important in local news. She's going to look at this from a more international perspective. And then Karen is going to talk and give you a UK perspective. She's going to give you, I think, 7 tips on how to publish local news successfully. There are people standing at the back. There are some seats at the front if anyone wants a seat. No? Good standing. Okay, great. So firstly, to give you an overview of why local news is important to us at Facebook. Firstly, local news is vitally important in any functioning democracy. It plays a really crucial role in holding local institutions, councils, governments to account. It's also, from our point of view, what we consistently see people want to hear about and read on our platform. We consistently see that people care about local news, so whether or not that's how a sports team is doing, or local shops that have opened, or just what's going on in their area. People want timely, relevant local news. It's also something that I feel personally quite passionate about because it's where I started my career in journalism. My first start in journalism was at the South London Press and at the Croydon Advertiser. And I don't know if there's anyone here familiar with those titles, apart from Karen. But I think, oh, great, woohoo, fellow South Londoner at the back. Excellent. I think really fondly of my time door knocking in South London. And from my point of view, and I think you guys would agree, it's the best grounding you can get in journalism. And obviously, the fact that there are so many of you here at lunchtime shows that there's a lot of people who are interested in it. So, local news is important. At Facebook, we wanted to do more to support local news and local publishers, and we thought that there was more that we could do. So we started talking to publishers in the UK, which is where I'm based, around partnering on some kind of project. And we spoke with regional news publishers, and they highlighted that there are 3 areas that were particularly important to them. Those areas were, firstly, diversity. We heard from publishers across the country that their newsrooms just didn't represent the rich diversity of the communities that they served. The second thing we heard was about resources, that they needed more resources across the country. And the third thing was about training, that they wanted more access to up-to-date training. So, in conjunction with the National Council for the Training of Journalists, the NCTJ, and the regional press, we launched the Community News Project in November last year. And that was our commitment to the local news industry. It's a £4.5 million fund designed to fund a training scheme for local reporters or aspiring local reporters across the country. This is run by the NCTJ, and there are 3 principles to this scheme. The first is that it's run by the NCTJ and the regional press. They are responsible for the funding and for the training. The second is that there's an emphasis on increasing diversity. We've put some ambitious diversity targets in place because we think that it's really important that local newsrooms reflect the areas that they're working in. And then the third thing is about making sure that we focus on underserved areas. We worked with the NCTJ and the regional press to identify areas in the UK where there was either no local title or no local newsroom. And those are the areas that we'll be focusing on and putting community reporters in. So how's it going? Well, we launched in November. The publishers started recruiting for these community reporter roles in January, February. Some of the recruitment is still ongoing. So far, we've had over 4,000 applications, and we've been really heartened by how many people have been interested in this. And I think that that's a testament to how many people care about and are passionate about local news. And frankly, how many people want to go into local news and be reporters covering their area. We had our first community reporter started work a couple of weeks ago in Worcester at the Worcester News. His name is Stephen Collins, and he never thought he'd be a journalist, but he always wanted to be. And he spent the past few years, his career so far, working in the care industry. So we're really delighted that he will be working with NewsQuest and the Worcester News. There's still a lot of work to do. It's really early stages at the moment, but we're heartened by the progress that we've made, and we look forward to continuing to work with the NCTJ and with the publishers. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Karen, who is going to talk to you a bit about her experiences being a local publisher and some of the successes they've had.
Hi. So I'm Head of Audience Engagement at Reach PLC, and for those of you who are not from the UK or familiar with Reach, we used to be called Trinity Mirror. We have national and regional titles across England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland. We also have more than 70 websites. We have regional reach. We're doing well at the moment, despite the sort of negative publicity that local news attracts. I have to say we have high brand awareness. We're having record site traffic, and as you can see from the bar chart above, we also have a high level of local audience penetration as well. We're currently expanding. We're launching new sites in places where we haven't previously had a presence. You can see the latest ones at the bottom there: Football Scotland, Lancs Live covering the county of Lancashire, and Cork Live in Ireland, which doesn't currently exist as a website, but it already exists now as a social presence. Now, the reason that I'm sitting here today is because last year was a very interesting time if you were in publishing and working with Facebook, because of the big announcements at the beginning of 2018 relating to the algorithm and the changes that were being made, and the headlines that followed about how this was going to be sort of this was it for publishers. We were all going down. We were going to lose all our Facebook traffic. We found at Reach this wasn't the case for us. In fact, our traffic from Facebook last year, we were slightly up on the year before. And I've got our this is for regionals. I've got our CrowdTangle chart here with the interactions on. The traffic chart actually looks quite similar to this. We ended the year on a high in Q4, and actually sort of Q1 for 2019, we've had record Facebook traffic. So the reason that I'm here today, sitting here in front of you, is to hopefully give some feel-good factor and just taking you through some of the ways that we're winning with Facebook at the moment. Now, this is Facebook things change. I'm sure if I was to give this very short presentation 3 months down the line, it might be substantially different because things are changing all the time at the moment. So I just want to focus on top level things that are really working well for us on Facebook in local news right now. And before I start, I just want to emphasize there's nothing that we're doing at the moment that we weren't doing, say, sort of 18 months, 2 years ago. But the difference is there are certain things that we're pushing and working a lot harder than we were sort of this time 18 months ago. And those are the things that I want to dwell on. So the first is, I've put the heading here, leverage your network for insights. So at Reach, we have sort of just shy of 50 social media editors across the country. Some are looking after social for one site, some are looking after social for multiple sites. And having a network of that size is, I think, the biggest asset that we have as a local news publisher, because it means that if we sort of pull that network together and we share intelligence and we collaborate, not just sort of sharing data, but also sort of talking things through, things that we've noticed, things that we've seen, we are able to pick up very, very quickly when there's a change, when we notice that something is different, either for better or for worse. So one of the things that we do, for example, we have a weekly Google Hangout. I mean, we can't do it in person because we're spread out so far. We have this weekly Google Hangout where social media editors, heads of audience, other sort of audience type people come on. It's usually sort of about an hour to an hour and a half. And this is, I've taken a screen grab from our sort of Google Calendar invitation. It's a regular agenda. We talk through, everybody talks through sort of what's been working for them, and we look at ideas, sort of tactics or content ideas that other newsrooms could adapt and use as well. But we also troubleshoot. So if somebody's having a problem, if a posts or pages or groups are underperforming, we have a hive mind and we work out what might be wrong. And I'm conscious that it's, as I said, I feel this is our single biggest advantage, having this network. I'm conscious that other publishers, other local publishers, do not have a network this size. But what I would say is, if you're a blogger, or if you're from a blogging background, you may know, for example, of the blog Mastermind groups, informal groups that are set up where bloggers get together, often over Google Hangouts again, every week or 2 weeks, small select groups, shared interests, and they sort of share insights in a similar way. If you do not have a big network, I don't think you need sort of a network representing 70-plus websites or sort of 4 dozen social media editors. But if you have a network of sort of just a few people or a dozen people, it can really make a difference, not just to sort of the quality of your intelligence, but the speed, the rapidity with which you can pick up on new trends and patterns as they emerge. And one example, the very recent example, this is sort of just going back a couple of months. A couple of our social media editors flagged that they had posts that were underperforming, and they could not work out why these posts had bombed on Facebook. We looked at it in more detail, and we thought it might be something to do with the words that were being used in the social headlines. And a couple of social media editors reported sort of the same words that hadn't previously seemed to be an issue, but any post now that had these words seemed to be doing really badly. So we set up a shared Google Sheet, spreadsheet, and every time a post underperformed, we sort of looked at the social headline, and the relevant social media editor would enter sort of words, suspect words or phrases into that spreadsheet. And we soon discovered patterns emerging and words that were cropping up over and over again. So we've now got this list. I don't call it banned words because I feel that my role sort of setting strategy is more about guidance than sort of dictating to people what to do most of the time. But they call them unrecommended words, and this is a fraction of them. Number 2, work CrowdTangle hard. Now, CrowdTangle is wonderful. I love CrowdTangle. I've come to realise that of the publishers who have access to this free Facebook-owned tool, Some of them only sort of prick the surface with it still, even now. So people will use it, for example, to see what posts that they've published are overperforming. Or they'll look to see what their competitors are doing, what their competitors have published that's doing really well. I enjoy on CrowdTangle sort of pushing it harder than that and spending a lot of time at the leaderboards to see what's working. I mean, this follows on from sort of leveraging your network. So I have, for example, a list on CrowdTangle and an accompanying leaderboard of all our brand pages. And what I like to do is rank them in order of page likes, as above, where I've sort of just taken a sort of a snapshot from a bit of the way down, and then using that to sort of plot developments, improvements, and again to look for patterns and trends. So, for example, you can see we've got a few pages here. They're all sort of roughly the same size. There's not much in it, but you can see there are differences in the volumes and the rates of engagement that they're getting. So if, for example, I'm Plymouth or Cornwall, I might want to look at what, say, Nottinghamshire is doing, because they've got a higher engagement rate than I have. And leaderboards are a good place to start. So I'll look at, for example, the volume of posts. Should I tweak the volume of posts that I'm publishing every day? Is it the type of post? If I hold my cursor over the average post per day, I can see how those posts break down into sort of link posts and sort of different types of native content, and use that as a springboard to sort of experiment to see what I can do to improve my overall volume of engagement. So number 3, so all about the MSI, the meaningful social interactions these days. So we quickly realised with the algorithmic developments in the first half of last year that it was all about the comments and the conversations. And whereas sort of 2 years ago we did optimize our Facebook posts, but we optimized them for click-throughs, now we optimize them for conversation as well, because we quickly realized that the more conversation you have on a post, the more sort of meaningful social interaction, the sort of those nested replies that you get in the comments, the frequency of the comments, the length of the comments, had a significant impact upon post performance and overall page performance. So now we optimize our posts for conversation as well. I've included one example here where this worked very well. And often optimizing for conversation, it simply boils down to only publishing posts that are going to be big talking points for your audience, and that you know are going to be big talking points for your audience. So this one on Manchester's Christmas markets, it was a native video, although as you can see from the comments, we did include a link back to a relevant story on our website. You can see this did very well for comments. People in Manchester are quite obsessed with the Christmas market. The other thing we do on CrowdTangle is with the weightings, whereas we used to wait for our CrowdTangle scores for shares, comments, reactions, we just wait for comments now. We don't bother with the others, we just wait for comments. We push Facebook groups a lot harder than we were doing a couple of years ago. I've included 3 examples here of Facebook groups that we set up just over a year ago and have built from scratch. The 3 examples I've included here, I think, are good ones, not just because they have sort of nice, sort of big, sturdy memberships, but also because if you visit any of these groups, you'll notice there's a really nice balance between sort of us posting our stories there and stuff we're working on, and us sort of sourcing really good story ideas from these groups, and also audience contributing their ideas and conversations as well. So these are 3 sort of busy, highly engaged groups that have worked well for us. We started putting tracking codes on any content of ours that we posted in our groups to see just how much traffic was coming back, because our analytics don't, it will say it's Facebook traffic, but a lot of the analytics programs, as you probably know, it has sort of Facebook traffic in like one big blob. It doesn't divide it into where it's coming from pages, from different groups. So we started monitoring the traffic from groups and found that they were indeed an effective source. The other thing we do is work with groups that we don't own, sort of work with group admins and build relationships with already existing local groups. Right, this is a sort of a bigger, baggier idea. I've called it "Don't Believe Bigger is Better," and I just wanted to show you a few examples of what I mean there. So, journalist pages on Facebook. Well, I think every publisher has them. We certainly had sort of dozens and dozens of reporters with their own Facebook pages, verified, sort of going back a couple of years. But we weren't working them as hard as we could have done. And these days our journalists take a lot more interest in their Facebook pages, and not just in the sense of populating them and keeping them sort of fresh and updated so they're not just sort of sitting on a random corner of Facebook gathering dust, but also building audiences there. Building engaged audiences around them and their content and their interests. And we're beginning to see sort of the rewards of this now. The example that I've included here is Sam Yarwood, who's a journalist at the Manchester Evening News. And her Facebook page is sort of still relatively small, sort of a few thousand page likes, but it's a highly engaged page. It's working really well. And something that we do on a number of our journalist pages is we don't treat them just as like a showcase for the reporter's own work. In other words, you know, in the old days, a reporter would publish a story on the website and then they'd also post that same story on their page on Facebook. We don't do that so much anymore. Like I said, it's more about building those engaged audiences around the content that your page audience is interested in, which isn't necessarily just that journalist story. So, for example, the post that I've included here from Sam, if you look carefully, you can see that it's not her byline. It's one of her colleagues' stories, and she's posted it on her page because she knows her page audience, and she knows they will be interested in this story. On the right, I've just got another CrowdTangle leaderboard. You can tell I love CrowdTangle leaderboards. We have lots of, in addition to our big brand pages, we also have lots of smaller pages that have been around for sort of years and years and sort of represent more hyper-local communities or sort of smaller publications that we own. And some of these used to be neglected. And there was also a trend across local publishers a couple of years ago to sort of merge smaller pages and sort of make them into sort of big pages representing a larger catchment area, a larger geographical region. And we've gone completely the other way now. We've come to realise that these small, more hyperlocal pages, although they have smaller audiences, these audiences are or can be very highly engaged. And we're much better off, actually, instead of merging and creating these big super pages, keeping all our sort of our smaller audiences sort of separate and more focused. And the second part of wondering if bigger is better, it's another sort of local content strategy that's working really well for us on Facebook at the moment. Now, I'm calling it super local. I'm trying to sort of differentiate it from hyper local. So super local is when you take that local identity content that works so well on the site, works well on Facebook, and you really sort of niche down on it, really sort of work it hard. So here are a couple of examples of what I mean by that. So this post here, native image post from Birmingham Live, give us a classic Brummie saying. For those of you who aren't familiar with Birmingham, sort of people from Birmingham are called Brummies, and they have a sort of a distinctive accent and sort of a distinctive sort of dialect as well. So give us a classic Brummie saying, super straightforward, a very, very popular post. We ran versions of this post ended up running it across sort of lots of our pages when we saw how well it worked. People really engaged with it. In the middle, I've got a post from a page called Black Country Live, and it's one of our most interesting pages at the moment. If you are working in local news and local news on Facebook, it's definitely one worth checking out, even though you might look at posts such as this one and wonder what on earth is going on here. So what's impressive about Black Country Live is in the space of just 6 months, they have grown their Facebook page audience from 0 to 20,000, 21,000, with an engagement rate of sort of 2%. It's a really highly engaged audience around their content. And although they're posting content their audience is very interested in, so breaking news, matters of local interest, so everything from sort of decisions on planning applications, high-profile planning applications to crime stories. They also do a really good line in appealing to sort of local pride or sort of local identity. The post in the middle is an example of that. I mean, as you can see, it's just a screen grab of a tweet, but it's in the Black Country dialect, and people engage with it very highly. Here's another example from Black Country Live on the right. Now, I'm not from the Black Country. I've since learned there are many things that exist in the Black Country that before this page launched I had no idea about. And one of them is they have orange chips. Their fries are orange. I think it's because they're they're battered chips with a special recipe. It's just in the Black Country. As far as I know, this is nowhere else. But it is a sort of a well-kept local secret. So Black Country Live made a video about orange chips. It's a really, really simple video. I don't think it would win any awards for sort of exquisite video making, but I think it was just sort of made on an iPhone and put together with some sort of stills and some captions. But this video did, I think it's about 500,000 views. And at the time, 500,000 views. And at the time, this page had only sort of 7,000 page likes. It was still in the early months. So despite being a very small new page, they used this sort of this super local strategy to really dig in and build a very highly engaged audience in a very short space of time. Another thing we do is ensure that our Facebook best practice is, I put here, it's baked into every newsroom. We ensure that every single reporter who is going to be writing sort of social media headlines, for example, into our CMS, so that when any of their content is posted on Facebook pages, it will have their social headline and choice of image. We ensure that every single reporter has our in-house training on our best practice. And that's standardised across Reach, regionals and our national publications as well. And our best practice is a combination of our own sort of style guide and in-house best practice, but also our tips and tactics for sort of getting the most out of Facebook. I have literally just sort of taken a grab from our best practice training deck for images. I don't think there's anything in there that's sort of startling or controversial, but the reporters, especially the new recruits, find this very valuable, and we update it regularly, of course. And finally, having just talked non-stop about Facebook for the last 15 minutes or so, I just wanted to make the point that to win at Facebook in 2019, as counterintuitive as this sounds, don't fixate on Facebook. Something that the 2018 on Facebook made clear is that it's complete and utter insanity to be so dependent upon Facebook for your page views or for your video views that if the algorithm is changed, then you're in a lot of trouble. We tend to have a sort of a healthy mix of sort of traffic referral sources on our publications anyway. But for example, with those new sites I had on that slide at the beginning, the new sites that we've been launching and are launching in 2019, in the old days, it would have been very tempting to sort of throw everything at Facebook with those new sites, because we knew that Facebook was where we could scale our audience quickly. And now, with our new launches, we're looking to different social networks. So, for example, one of our newest launches, it's WhatsApp that's at the centre of the content strategy rather than Facebook. With another one that's coming up, it's LinkedIn that's at the centre of the content strategy on social. Facebook is still important, and I think Facebook would definitely be very important to us for the foreseeable future, because it remains still sort of the quickest way to build an engaged audience quickly. But it's now, or should be very clear to everyone, that sort of putting all your eggs in one basket like that is foolish. So we've been sort of exploring and growing audiences on other platforms as well. So Instagram, for example, and Instagram stories. We've got WhatsApp. It's Nottinghamshire Live. I've got on the right-hand side there, where they simply put this sort of block of text at the bottom of their stories with their WhatsApp number. Then you can join their broadcast lists. They send out these daily updates. Just 3 stories with bit.ly links. Very simple, very straightforward. And they get extraordinarily high conversion rates and click-through rates from that, sort of 30 to 50% at times. On Instagram stories, something that we've learned is not just how to sort of drive engagement and traffic from Instagram stories, but that we're in this for the longer haul now. We don't expect to see the sort of immediate and short-term gains that we saw with Facebook. We do it over a longer period. So, for example, Manchester, this is their sort of traffic growth graph chart from Instagram stories. You can see they started sort of modestly, and it sort of took a few months to really take off. But it's worth it. So we are working Facebook as hard as we can at the moment, but we also are putting a lot of TLC into other platforms as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have time for questions at the end, because I definitely want to make sure we get questions from people about this. But I will hand over to Joy, who is going to give you more of an international perspective and talk about some of her research.
Hi, yeah, so I'm going to share just a couple of the key findings from a report that we released last year looking at the digital transition of local news. And in particular, we wanted to understand how legacy publishers, local and regional newspapers were navigating this transition in terms of their editorial practices as well as in terms of their commercial practices. And this, of course, includes community engagement, audience development, social media, all those types of factors. So these are the outlets, the news organizations that we talked with. They represent 4 different countries, and we did nearly 50 interviews at West France and Nice Matin in France, Westfalen-Post and Main-Post in Germany, Huddersfield Examiner, which is part of Reach in the UK, and the Kent Messenger Group, Kaleva and Jutula Sanomat in Finland, and we also talked with some people from Nose Median in Germany, as well as JPI, Johnston Press in the UK. In particular, tried to talk with people at all different levels in the newsrooms, from digital editors, editors-in-chief, managing editors, to reporters, commercial directors, and also wanted to represent different types of ownership models, larger national companies down to smaller independently owned publishers. So this is the 3 key themes that we took away, and we really wanted to understand at a broad level the approaches that these news groups were taking to online news production as well as to monetization. And we identified 3 key approaches: national scale, regional breadth, and local depth. And I'll give some examples of these in a minute. But these strategies shaped all different facets of news production at these local publishers. It shaped the way they thought about their newsroom structures and how they integrated online production into that, to their print and online editorial content, how they thought about audiences, as well as how they thought about and were trying to diversify their business models. And the first approach here, and I'll kind of quickly talk about some benefits and challenges associated with all of these, but the national scale approach was primarily among the national publishers, so a way of pursuing a portfolio of lots of different titles that in aggregate can draw large audiences, primarily focused on online advertising to drive that. And through that, we saw things like centralized production of online editorial and advertising content, a focus on really developing a company-wide digital culture that really informs what happens at the local newsrooms, so having training and conference calls and frequent conversations at different types of groups about how to maximize the reach that content has, as well as a large network of newspapers and websites, which respondents in this group said was really valuable because they always had people to talk to and ask questions of when they had things that they were dealing with on a daily basis. And of course, with this comes, focusing on acquiring traffic targets for editorial and advertising reach, and then questions about how do you kind of take a newsroom culture that's focused on company-wide goals while also recognizing some of those local considerations as well. And here's an example from Reach that exemplifies what's happening with this approach. And this was a focus on creating large-scale editorial projects that are developed at a central level. I talked with Helen Harper, the head of communities, who talked a lot about this, and the idea that they come up with a theme, in this case premature birth, and how families dealt with that, and invited readers to share their stories, to share their photos, and then featuring those in these local newspapers, as well as acquiring a lot of engagement on Facebook and other platforms to talk about how this affected people. And she said this really resulted in, highly engaged readers that were commenting and sharing and really engaging with those local newsrooms to share these stories. And so she saw this as a really successful approach. And then we also saw this in the national scale approach in looking at things like reader service content. And so articles that are really dealing with the day-to-day. And what are things that readers are asking about and they want to know about that can really draw a lot of engagement in these online spaces. Mark Thompson at JPI talked about these are questions like, can I get out of my house today, with the snow? Or where can I go for a drink tonight? How is my child's school doing? And he said that these are service and they may not be, hard news in that traditional sense, but he said these are stories that affect people's lives and have really been effective for drawing readership on their sites. The next focus was a regional breadth approach, and this was an approach that we saw that really focused on developing highly regionalized strategies. Within this, we saw some centralized content creation, like with national scale, as well as solutions-focused digital experts, like digital teams within publishing groups that worked with local newsrooms to address their questions and help them develop new products and strategies. We also saw a focus on continuing to emphasize the potential of print and what it could uniquely offer and some aesthetic value it could bring in contrast to online content. And questions about rethinking the local audience, maybe less so in terms of geographic focus and more in terms of demographic focus. So how can we reach young readers, young families, people living in cities, business people, different types of groups that way. And here's an example from Westfalen-Post in Germany that I think nicely highlights this strategy. And they're taking a very project-based approach to developing. They're doing their day-to-day news coverage, but also developing these packages that they can report across different types of platforms and really draw some engagement that way. This is one they did on cold cases and on crimes in the region, which they did a long-form article that took several weeks to produce, as well as podcasts and online stories, even some product tie-ins that went along with this. And Joost Leben, the editor, said that this was a way to really encourage creativity in the newsroom, let people have the time and liberty to really think through the best ways to tell these stories across different types of platforms, and think about ways to engage the audience with that as well. And they've used this strategy with several different projects. I'll skip over this. And the last strategy was a local depth strategy. And this was more evident among the independent publishers or the independent owned publishers in the sample, and that they were very focused on local communities, both in terms of editorial and commercial strategies, thinking about their distinctive newsroom culture so that they could create content that is that community will connect with, and also kind of a focus on paywalled premium content and membership models within that, but very heavily focused on that local community and creating content and strategies that really resonate with them. And an interesting example of this, and I know there was a whole panel on solutions journalism earlier today, but was at Nice Matan, and in their online editorial strategy have focused on solutions journalism, so going beyond that who, what, when, where, why, and how, and thinking about the what next and what do we do, and so interviewing people about challenges they face, as well as thinking about how can we take this conversation forward, and this has resulted in, I think, 10,000 members who have signed on to receive this content and engage in sharing ideas about what they might report on next. And Damien Aleman, the chief of the digital newsroom there, said that it's really to seek out people who have found solutions and find a way to present that and drive a continued conversation. And I'll end with this quote here that I think really speaks to this local depth model as well. This is a reporter at Kaleva in Finland who has been reporting on kind of long-form features, human interest stories in her community for a long time. And she said, even with all these changes happening with digital and all the things they have to think about now, it's ultimately about telling the stories of the community and really reflecting what's happening there. And so she said that it's a way to talk about identity and think about who am I and where am I from, and showing people that there's something to be respected. So really emphasizing that local identity and those local stories. And so regardless of what platform it's on, this remains a really key focus. All right, and thank you, and happy to take any questions about this.
Great, thank you both. So we've got about 10 minutes left for questions. Does anyone have any questions for Karen or Joy or for me? I can see an arm there. Are there microphones?
I think it's a really good idea to get something more local news, but is Facebook the right platform for that? Because Facebook is not a journalist or a platform for journalists, and I think it with the algorithm and something like that, maybe it's not the right place for news.
Do you, as a publisher, do you want to take that, Karen, and then I can jump in?
Sure. I mean, it's not the only platform with an algorithm. When you look at where publishers' traffic is coming from, obviously there's Google as well. Well, Google is also governed by an algorithm that is frequently updated and not always in the favour of publishers. For example, the latest core algorithm update from a few weeks ago has seemingly left many publishers out in the cold a bit more than they were previously. I think working with platforms, working with algorithms is just part and parcel of journalism in 2019 if we want to build engaged audiences around our content. It's, as I said earlier, I think the main thing to remember is not to become too dependent upon any one platform. They all carry their risks.
And just to add to that, we consistently see that local news does well on the platform. We hear from people who use Facebook that it's the news that they want to read about, that's important to them. But I mean, as with any kind of digital strategy, we would never say put all of your content only on Facebook. It should be part of your digital strategy, but by no means the only solution.
So before you said something that I found very interesting. You said that small pages function better than a very big one on Facebook. Can you explain a little bit more why that is? Because our news site just made a very big one and skipped the small ones.
Well, if it's any consolation, that's not quite what I said. So if it came across incorrectly, I apologise. It was what I was trying to get across was more the case that previously we'd just focused on our big pages, and those smaller pages, had been around for years, but they weren't getting the TLC, the time, the attention, and the love that our bigger pages were getting. Whereas over the past sort of 18 months or so, we've realised actually these smaller pages, sort of hyper-local, hyper-focused, the communities there are very highly engaged, and these are sort of gems in our, we've got about sort of 350 Facebook pages at Reach. So it was quite easy to overlook the ones that had just a few thousand page likes in favour of the ones, with 1 million plus page likes. Whereas now we're realising that size of page, or rather size of page audience, doesn't sort of necessarily dictate how we should sort of apportion our time and attention. We've realised those smaller pages are valuable too.
So the work pays off for the small pages because it's a lot of work to be in love with all of them.
I know. It's difficult, and obviously with local news, so much of it is about maximum possible output and the best possible quality. When your resources, your human resources, are limited and your time is limited, so we do give our biggest pages extraordinary amounts of TLC, but we just make sure the smaller ones aren't neglected as perhaps they might have been previously. And like I said, there was this trend across local publishers to sort of amalgamate, to merge those smaller pages into bigger ones, and we don't do that anymore. Or there has to be a really good reason for us to be sort of merging pages now.
A question for Karin. So you said you increased a lot your engagement on Facebook with CrowdAngle. So what about your traffic performance during the same period?
You mean our how did our Facebook traffic perform?
Yeah, I mean traffic coming from Facebook.
Yep. So we it's up year on year and it's up month on month.
And are you monetizing videos on Facebook, or how your company is profiting from this audience engagement growth on Facebook? So how it is seen by your company in terms of revenue side?
So the Reach PLC model, sort of revenue comes from a variety of sources, mainly from sort of display advertising on our websites. So the traffic that we get from Facebook remains very important to us. At the same time, we have sort of increasingly diversified and sort of monetizing our social presence in different ways. So, for example, Facebook ad breaks, where native video is monetized, the in-stream video ads on Twitter, and also we sort of started. We're doing sort of more events than we did previously as well. So, for example, I had up very briefly the Manchester Evening News Instagram account, which has sort of nearly 150,000 followers. They organise real life meetups. Those aren't monetised at the moment, but it's showing us that there is potential and there's opportunity there, because we have these social presences and we have these highly engaged social audiences. And events might be one way forward. We have, for example, with our podcasts, we have real life meetups around some of those, and those have been going very well. So, monetising in different ways.
Your hand was first in the second row.
Thanks. It's a question for Karen and Joy, really. I think that if you are offering a service that nobody else is offering and doing it really well, you should probably be able to charge people directly for that content. Have you experimented with paywalls, subscriptions, and for Joy, is anyone doing it well and making money from that?
Yeah, I think there was an interesting divergence there that in France, Finland, and Germany, there were paywalls across the different outlets I talked with, but with using different kinds. Mostly it was a freemium model, but particularly looking at monetizing local news and trying to figure out maybe beyond breaking news, but to the kind of longer form human interest, profiles, commentary, things that those outlets could do really uniquely and distinctively that couldn't be found elsewhere. And so that seemed to be consistent across that. It's still a big question over what works and what doesn't. It's still a fairly fairly small chunk, when you look more broadly at the news landscape. But I think examples like Nice Matan and their solutions journalism are working well. They've seen increasing subscriptions to that, and it's been effective to really find that niche. And so that's what I think in those outlets I'm seeing they're really trying to figure that out. In Finland, looking at a premium content model and trying to figure out what stories people are going to be interested in that they might not be able to find elsewhere. But yeah, hard to say what works and what doesn't. But I think there's some interesting experimentation and very much a focus on local and distinctive for sure.
No, we're not doing it at the moment, but we're looking at other publishers' initiatives with interest.
Hello. Thank you for really great presentations. And I have just maybe two questions mainly to Karen. I run a local media in Ukraine, and we are also thinking of making it a network. So your experience is very important to us. But when you mentioned, I want to ask you about this case with Brahmi sayings in Birmingham. If you pay more attention to such kind of content, which is quite very easy, very light content, will you be still able to attract as much attention to more serious topics like, I don't know, investigations or some other topics which are crucial to local community? And another question, how does your editorial management look like? For example, if your local editor in Liverpool or anywhere in Birmingham tells you that there's a strong demand for such a topic, but you see on Facebook trends or other things, other insights that you have to put some other topic which is in trend, like in the UK in general, how will you make decision and who will make decision which content to publish? Thank you.
So it's a difficult question to answer in just a few words because we have all these different newsrooms around the UK and they all look very different. So some of them are well populated, some of them are you have these very small teams producing incredible work given the resources that they have. So it differs from team to team, from newsroom to newsroom. What we do have is a cadre of extremely talented social media editors and heads of audience, which helps. I sort of showed a quick grab from that best practice deck, and we work really hard to ensure that everybody gets the the training that they need. We also our social media editors enjoy a high level of trust. And are trusted to make the right decisions and to understand the audience. Because often, of course, we have site audience and we have Facebook audience and we have Twitter audience, we have Instagram audience. Well, those audiences aren't just like one big mass. They're very different. For example, we have there's content that for, say, Manchester or Hull will work really well on Instagram stories, but we wouldn't put it on Facebook, for example, on Facebook newsfeed. So it's more a case of being very, very, being hypersensitive and very tuned in to who our audiences are and what their appetites are, the content that they will engage with. And I can't remember what your first question was, I'm sorry.
About light content.
Yes, yes.
About light content and
right.
Will you attract attention to serious topics?
It is absolutely about striking a balance and finding the right balance. When I had those sort of examples of Black Country Live posts that did really well, that were these super local posts, but to find them I had to go through the Black Country Live page, through all these posts about crime, about the planning applications, about the other important local issues affecting the lives of Black Country residents. So although I they were quite light-hearted posts that I showed that's not reflective of that page's content. And that page, along with many other pages, have managed to find that balance of breaking news, news on matters that's very important to our local audiences, but the balance with the more sort of light-hearted stuff that appeals to sort of local identity.
Thank you. I think that's it, because we're out of time now and I can see people waving at me at the back. But if you've got more questions, please come and find us after. And thank you everyone for coming.